to this first in-person hybrid meeting of the Borough Plan Advisory Committee. I wanted to start by just acknowledging and giving a big thanks to officers for getting this all set up and getting us in a good place to be able to do this. We have people, for those that are watching from the outside, we have councillors in the chamber and in virtually as well. The officers that are speaking, they'll be with us virtually. For the understanding of councillors and just for the ease of how we do this, because where I am now, for those that can't see, those that are virtual are behind me. So for the first item, I will start with those on the screen, and for the second item, I will put those people last. Obviously, we can be a bit flexible as we go along, but broadly, I'll stick to that rule just to make things a bit easier and a bit smoother if everyone's happy. So, first item of business is apologies for absence. I think we've got everyone we're expecting. I know we had apologies. Excuse me. It's quite warm in the chamber today. I know we had apologies from a couple of councillors. We've got Helena Dollimore here, Councillor Dollimore substituting, and we also have Councillor Holden. Thank you both for stepping in place of Councillor Latif, and obviously Helena's in place of Councillor Stanford. So
I'm also here replacing Councillor Fairclough.
I can't hear Simon very well.
Sorry, can you hear me better now? I'm here replacing Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Simon. I apologise for forgetting you. It's by virtue of having you behind my head, I think. But thank you for stepping in at the last minute. So I think that's it for apologies for absence. The next is declarations of pecuniary interest. Does anyone have any declarations? I'm looking first at the people in the chamber.
I don't know if it's appropriate to mention, but I am a member of Plan Wimbledon, and I know it's a topic for discussion. So I don't know if I need to note that, but
I think the last time we discussed Plan Wimbledon, people who are members or have been involved did declare that. I think it's worth doing so. Thank you. Does anybody else want to declare similar?
Yes, I do, Simon.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, moving on to notes of the previous meeting. So we've got one cover note. I won't go through it line by line. For this point, I'll take people in the room first. I'll go to Councillor Butler and then to Councillor Dollimore.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually Councillor Dollimore that made me notice this. Is on the minutes of last time I did mention the Britannia Point and the tower and how that was phrased going forward. So it would be good maybe going forward to note kind of main points of support or not of certain areas of discussion as well, and just to beef up those minutes so the members of the public can have a good record of what happened. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Dollimore.
Yeah. Can you hear me all right?
I can,
yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Similar to the points that Councillor Butler raised, I just think we need minutes and notes of a meeting that are more substantial and give a bit more of an indication of the discussion that was had. There is obviously the YouTube version of the meeting, but it would be good to have a bit more indication of, you know, for example, under agenda item 4, what were the points raised, what were the points discussed, and what were the actions decided on the edits to the local plan. I think that'd be helpful going forward if we have more detailed minutes of these meetings.
Thank you for that. I'll see if anybody on with us virtually wants to say anything, and I'll take it to Tara and to officers. Looks like that's a no. So yeah, it was just a couple of points there raised about the minutes and just how we how we know actions and things that were discussed. Either officers happy to kind of come in just quickly. I think broadly, obviously, as Councillor Dollemore said, the meeting was recorded, but I think it is good practice to make sure we're as clear as possible in the meeting notes.
Sorry, Chair, I wasn't quite clear if you're inviting me in to speak. I just want to say, yes, we will do our best to record it more accurately, and apologies for not doing so before. I'd just also like to mention that this meeting isn't serviced normally by Democracy Services. They've been really helpful in setting up the Zoom and the situation we have today, but there's actually not a Democracy Service representative here to take the notes. So I am both talking to us and taking notes, and I'm afraid sometimes one suffers at the extent of the other, but we will take better notes tonight, and I will send them round to councillors so that we can be sure we have an accurate record of the meeting on paper.
Thank you, Tara. And I think, we'll appreciate that it's difficult to do the two things at once, and particularly tonight when there's some quite meaty things on the agenda. But it's obviously useful, therefore, to have this point in the next meeting to raise things like that if we do want to highlight them. So, thank you for raising them, and thank you for that response, Tara. So I think we've dealt with that. I think we can move on to item 4, which is Plan Wimbledon's application to be a neighbourhood forum for their proposed neighbourhood area. Tara, would you like to give us an introduction to this item?
Thank you, Chair. Please don't hesitate, especially in the chamber, to let me know if you can't hear me. I can hear Councillor McGrath very clearly, but I'm not sure that you could in the chamber. So if you can't hear me, please stop me. The report tonight in front of you is quite long. You will recall, councillors, that those of you who attended the Borough Plan Advisory Committee in March had a presentation from Plan Wimbledon, and that was just before the council published their Plan Wimbledon's application and map to become a neighbourhood forum for the neighbourhood area of Wimbledon. That was published for 6 weeks, from the 12th of April to the 23rd of May. It was advertised across the borough. We initially thought we'd maybe only advertise it in Wimbledon, but actually it's much better to advertise it widely, because people who use Wimbledon for socialising or for work or something like that may well not live in the area. A huge response was received, over 1,000 responses as set out in the report. Substantial support for Plan Wimbledon proposals. Over 90% of people supported the proposed forum. The government guidance on this is quite clear, and although the report is long, I would draw your attention to a couple of paragraphs within it. One is, if we just discuss the neighbourhood forum first, that despite the huge level of support, one of the key things that government is looking at in designating neighbourhood forums is that they have support from across the area, so different parts, geographic parts of the area, but also different sections of the area that the plan proposes to cover. This means for a very small area, it's quite easy to achieve, but for such a large, complex area as this one, it is slightly more difficult to achieve. It's clear from the consultation results that are set out summarised in the report and set out in more detail in the appendices that there is great support. However, there are a couple of criteria that it was difficult for Plan Wimbledon to meet on this occasion. And for that reason, officers are recommending that the proposal for the neighbourhood forum be refused. I draw your attention to page 11 of the report, paragraph 2.17, which sets out government's criteria for the forum. Plan Wimbledon have passed criteria A. In other words, they've got members that are living and working and are elected representatives of the area. The issue has been with criteria B, more so in the different sections of the area. Substantial support from the residential section, but the area proposed covers 4 town centres including Wimbledon Town Centre, and one of the strategic industrial locations in Merton. There was not a strong response from the business community and some objections from elements of the business community. So Plan Wimbledon's proposal can't be said to pass this criterion. Therefore, at this time, officers are recommending that Plan Wimbledon's application at this stage be refused. We did think of other alternatives, and these are set out in section 3 of the report. One of the alternatives was to simply extend the time and see if we could bring those issues closer together and see if those issues could be resolved. However, government's criteria are very, very clear that in order to make quick decisions on neighbourhood fora and not leave applicants waiting for ages, councils have to make these decisions within 13 weeks of the day after the first day of consultation. And that finishes, I think, on the 13th of July. So while on this occasion, we haven't been able to extend the time, what we have been doing is continue to meet with Plan Wimbledon and discuss these matters to see if these issues could be resolved in a future application. I think at this point, I'll stop because it's quite a long report and councillors may have questions.
Thank you for that, Tara. I said for this item, I'd go first to those on screen. So is there anybody on screen that would like to come in on this?
I have a question, please, Councillor Quilliam.
I think I saw Councillor Pearce first. Sorry, Simon, he just got in before you.
Fine.
Councillor Pearce, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My major point was on 2.39, where they have got a committee of 12, but only one from the business sector. Now, we're always being told that Wimbledon is very important to our business life existence. I find it hard to believe that they could manage with only one, and shouldn't we be requesting them to have more and make the I also find it they don't need the business representative there to be quorum. I'm puzzled by that. Have you any thoughts on that? Because I'm puzzled by that.
Do you want to come back, Tara, and then we can go to Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Pearce, paragraph 2.39 talks about Plan Wimbledon's constitution rather than a membership. I must clarify that Plan Wimbledon have more than one business representative in the 29 members that they put forward in their application. I think there's 4 from the business sector. However, paragraph 2.39 clarifies that currently Plan Wimbledon's constitution only requires one representative from the business sector, and also it's, as it says there, the business representative doesn't have to be present for the decisions to be quorate. That's the purpose of that paragraph.
Can I just come back on that for a moment? That would mean that they could make decisions that, if you like, were not favourable to the business community without, from that point, and then they could get into loggerheads with business. It's just my view, I mean.
Yes, it is one of the, in combination with some other factors to do with business representation, it is one of the issues we've raised with Plan Wimbledon.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor McGrath. You're muted. You're muted, Simon.
Sorry. I've got 2 questions. The first one, and I apologise if I should know this, but I'm not clear about it, is what is the status of this discussion at this committee? The 2 items we're discussing have already been to the Cabinet, which have made a decision. They're going to Council next week. So I'm not quite sure what the discussion at this meeting contributes to the overall discussion. So perhaps if you could clarify that. And the second one is about the timescales. I mean, it does seem extremely unfortunate that, given the very strong public support for this and the enormous number of people who've commented, that we aren't able, before the council is asked to reject it, that we aren't able to actually try and get an agreement between Love Wimbledon and Plan Wimbledon to sort out these problems. Are we absolutely sure there isn't time to try and come up with that agreement by, even if it requires knocking heads together? Because the worst thing I think would be for it to be rejected and then to some degree have to start again.
Go ahead, Tara. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. On the first question about what this meeting brings to it, Borough Planning Advisory Committee advises decision makers, in this case, full council, about their views on particular reports. So it is a cross-party advisory committee. Normally, the way it works is Borough Planning advises Cabinet, that advises Council, but actually in this particular case, the meetings have been reversed. That doesn't matter because the Council's constitution clearly states that Borough Plan Advisory Committee can make recommendations that advise full council next week. So for the two items on the agenda tonight, they're both going to full council next week on the 7th, and the records of this meeting will be used to advise the 60 councillors at full council. On the second issue, yes, I mean, I agree. The first thing we did when we realised how this might go was we spoke to our legal team to see is there any way we could just extend that 13-week timetable, not indefinitely, obviously, but just to try and get more time. Unfortunately, that's just not something that the government's regulations allow. What we've also done is met Plan Wimbledon. We've met them this week with the cabinet member. We've met them, I think, last week. So we're keeping up the dialogue and the engagement. And we've offered to speak with them and also Love Wimbledon to see if we can get a sort of, maybe bring that issue closer together. Plan Wimbledon have really reached out and they've been really responsive and taken things on board. So although this is a negative report in the recommendation, you'd hope that it would get to a stage to be positive. I think it's probably, having spoken this week to Plan Wimbledon, it's probably a bit of a stretch to see that that will happen before the 7th of July. But let's hope we can continue to work together to resolve the issues that are identified.
Thank you.
Okay, we can move to questions from those in the room. Councillor Butler, as you happen to be straight in my eye line. Apologies to other councillors.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just like to comment on my disappointment that it's got to this late stage, really, and to say well done so far for the big support that they have got. I was actually disappointed as well that there wasn't as much cooperation there that there could have been with the businesses so far, and I suppose the timing was quite difficult there. But also just to raise something that I actually raised last time when we spoke about Plan Wimbledon, and this might actually be a good opportunity to rectify it, is the lower engagement with younger people. I raised this last time, and without being too poetic about it, there's definitely, these are the people that are going to live with decisions going forward, and so I think any group like Plan Wimbledon need to get as much engagement from young people as possible. There was a slightly improved situation this time, I grant them that, but nowhere near enough in my opinion, and I'm hoping that there is a miracle that happens in this timetable and they get approval anyway. But if they don't, I think that will be a good opportunity for them to really try to get as much engagement from those younger people. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I don't think there was a direct question there, so I think Tara can probably respond to you along with whoever comes in next. I think Councillor Dollamore, I saw. No, apologies.
Thank you. What advice was given to Plan Wimbledon? Because back at the start of the year, there was clearly an impetus to get this going and a very strict and quick timetable. So what advice was given for them to start that? And while I would like to understand also what advice was also given to businesses, because I've detected on the ground that businesses seem to be mostly misinformed about the intentions of Plan Wimbledon. And so I was wondering how the council, either the cabinet member or the officers, provided advice to both the business and to Plan Wimbledon because it sounds like this has been set up to fail, and I find that quite disappointing.
Are you happy to come in on that, Tara?
Yes, Councillor, on advice to Plan Wimbledon, we've worked with them for quite some time now. I think probably it's fair to say in a more concentrated way in 2020 and 2021 than before, but we've been engaging with the group and the predecessor group since probably about 2018. And there's a core group of Plan Wimbledon that we engage with fairly regularly, and we worked with them on the application, and they sent us drafts when we looked at it. We worked with them on the timing for the consultation to try and make sure that it fitted in with a number of different things, including the council's committee cycle. So there was a lot of dialogue since probably late 2020, probably about sort of September 2020, all the way through. As I said, we've met them as recently as earlier this week. And we give advice to Plan Wimbledon. We don't give advice to other entities about Plan Wimbledon. That's Plan Wimbledon's role. And in their application, you'll be able to see that they have met a huge number of different groups and organisations as part of forming their application. And they have changed their boundary to reflect the views of some of these applications, some of these organisations. This all happened before the application was finalised and submitted to the council. So they did the right thing by making sure that people knew about Plan Wimbledon before they got the council's letter. One of the very clear pieces of advice that we've heard from other councils and that we passed on was that if people hear about a planning issue for the first time in a council email or a council letter, there tends to be a bit of a hesitation and potentially a negative response. If people are aware beforehand by the landowner or by the neighbourhood planning group or by their local community group, there tends to be more engagement and interaction when they do receive the council information. So we have passed that on in Plan Wimbledon. We're very good and robust in engaging with different people, including the business community, in the run-up to submitting their final application and constitution and map to the council. And we worked with them as well on preparing the boundary of the map to make sure it was clear and compliant. Sorry, Councillor, could you mention your second point that you raised? Advice to businesses, I think.
Yes, what advice has been given to business? Because it seems, reading the report and the feedback I've been hearing, it is clear that certain aspects of the business community are trying to block this and seem to have a misinformed view of what's been going on, despite the best efforts of councillors and people in Plan Wimbledon.
Plan Wimbledon has done a presentation to Love Wimbledon, the business improvement district for Wimbledon Town Centre. I'm not so clear, I can't speak for them, I'm not so clear about the engagement at Plough Lane and other places. As a council, we haven't done presentations to any of those groups on planning. I think the last neighbourhood plan presentation I did was to Wimbledon Community Forum, but that was some years ago. So we haven't given lots of advice about Plan Wimbledon to businesses or business groups. I would also add that this is something that I think Councillor Quillen mentioned. The timing of this has been a little, very difficult, in fact, for businesses. People might recall that the first opening up of business happened on the 12th of April, and that was the day that the public consultation started. Unfortunately, in advance, we didn't know that the lockdown would open up on that particular day. And I think with hindsight, had we known, Plan Wimbledon and ourselves would probably have worked together to try and change that date. So it was unfortunate that the lockdown, the first day of the consultation, coincided with the first lockdown opening up, and businesses, frankly, were much more focused on that particular issue than on planning issues such as this.
Thank you for that, Tara. Just to follow up on that, from my experience just as chair of this committee, I think it was really good to have them at the last meeting. I think they were really positive, and there seems to have been quite positive engagement from you as officers and the council more generally. It is, as you say, it's a shame around the timing, but I'm just to clarify, I'm right in thinking that this isn't the end. This is just a kind of staging post. We're still in conversations with them. There will be an opportunity in future to have some of those conversations with businesses. So it could come back in the future. Is that correct, Tara?
Yes, absolutely. We continue to support them with this. There are various things that Plan Wimbledon may choose to do. Everything from changing the boundaries at certain points to rebooting engagement with businesses at plough lane and other areas. And we were more than happy to continue to support them on those issues. I think it's very clear from the consultation feedback that from the residential point of view, there is a substantial amount of support. And I think that hopefully this will work its way through and get to a successful conclusion in the future.
Thank you for that, Tara. I'm just going to do a kind of final call. Oh, Councillor Dollymore.
Thank you, Chair. Very small point and doesn't need a response. But I just, on the front sheet of the agenda, the lead officer and lead member, there's a typo under lead member. Should be Councillor Martin Welton. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So yeah, just a final call for any more questions. One final call. One final question. Councillor Holden.
Thank you, Councillor Quilliam. So assuming this does fall at full council next week, if Plan Wimbledon was to come back and try something again, what advice would you give them on this occasion, and how quickly could they look to try and get designation? So I'm sort of interested in timelines. Would it be a few months or would it be another year or so? And also, if they did go for that and we got the same outcome where the residents and a few businesses were supportive, but one particular one refused, what happens in that outcome?
Laura?
I think that on the first question of timing, we would work with Plan Wimbledon to go at the speed that they're able to go at. As I mentioned before, it's much better with something like this, or the advice from other councils is much better from something like this for issues to be resolved before the official council consultation and matters to be worked through outside the official or up to the official process, because the engagements that Plan Wimbledon can do, I have done with different groups, is much, much stronger and better. In this case, the council's in more of a regulatory position, so we can't be championing or not supporting a particular neighbourhood planning group. It's clear from Plan Wimbledon's application that there are other bodies in Wimbledon that are residents groups and indeed business groups that are interested in neighbourhood planning and may come forward as well. So we'd be happy to support Plan Wimbledon at the pace that they want to go to be able to resolve this. And if that is a fast pace, that's what we'll work to. And if that's a slower pace, that's what we work to too. So we'd be happy to work at whatever support and level of support they need to get to the end conclusion. Sorry, Councillor, I've forgotten the second question.
Yes, assuming that all goes ahead and they try again for another consultation and we get a very similar outcome where vast majority support it and one or two particularly disgruntled business community types who are dead set against come what may, how will the council respond in that situation? At some point we might have to take a majority view rather than just listening to one disgruntled group who has an axe to grind.
The government's rules on this are quite clear on neighbourhood planning, and they're set out in the report, particularly the paragraph 2.17, which really summarises the issues for the forums. Plan Wimbledon have got a good response to this consultation from most of the area, the geographic area that they have proposed to cover. There are a couple of places that it hasn't got a great response. One of those is Plough Lane Industrial Estate. Another is lesser response, but some response in Wimbledon Town Centre, and also a little bit to the north of the borough. We're much less worried about the area to the north of the borough around the All England Lawn Tennis Club. Parkside Residents Association, we understand, are part of Plan Wimbledon from the application, and also All England Tennis Club have supported their proposals as well. in Plough Lane strategic industrial location, the fact that there are no responses means that for that particular criterion, Plan Wimbledon can't pass that stage, because Plough Lane strategic industrial location is one of 3 strategic industrial locations in the borough. As Plan Wimbledon are proposing to cover that, we do need to hear some level of response support from that area. The fact that there's silence just simply means that nobody supports or rejects it, but we do need to hear. It must be clear that different sections of the community, including that business community, that do support Plan Wimbledon, and that's not what we have at the moment. That could either be through membership of Plan Wimbledon through their application, or at least support through the consultation. And again, with the town centre, we just need to see a support that ranges not just for small businesses, but also for the bigger businesses that typify Wimbledon. The Wimbledon area, with its 4 town centres of South Wimbledon, Wimbledon Village, Arthur Road, and Wimbledon Town Centre, is typified by some small businesses, but also quite a lot of big businesses. So there needs to be an element of support from that section of the community. So we would advise to try and generate that support and generate that response. It has been hard. The end of the lockdown will have been businesses are very much focused elsewhere. But hopefully as things move forward, they'll be able to give a bit of time for Plan Wimbledon and resolve that issue.
Thank you for that, Tara, and I'll move on in just a second. Just to clarify, because I know we touched on it at the last meeting when they presented to us, but I think that by understanding the reasoning behind that and why the government guidance is so clear on this is because actually once you start the process, this group will, the neighbourhood plan will take years to pull together, and this group will be the only group that can do that. So demonstrating that broad support early on is really important, because not only will the plan itself take time to put together, but then it will affect development in Wimbledon, to Councillor Butler's point, over a number of years from that point. Sorry, Tara, can you just respond quickly?
Sorry, yes, that's correct. When a neighbourhood forum comes in place for the area that they mark out, they are the only ones who can make a plan for that area. Now, Plan Wimbledon's constitution is quite open, it encourages membership, but no other group could make a plan for that, or neighbourhood plan rather, for that area 4 or 5 years. And that's why government stressed that people have to be represented, different sections of the community in terms of businesses and residents and things like that, but also different geographic areas. And that's why it's very much an opt-in process. We can't just guess that if people haven't responded that they do support Plan Wimbledon. It must be clear that there is support from these different sections of the community.
Thank you, Tara. Well, I think we can move on to the final agenda item, which is Merton's local plan and policies map. I just wanted to sort of start by saying, obviously, this is quite a
Chair,
staging post in what has been a long process.
Chair, could I please ask if the borough plan resolves the recommendations in the last reports?
Yes, you can. I think this is the second time you've had to remind me of that. Apologies. As chair, I will remember for the second item. Can I ask the room that we resolve the item? I'm seeing nods. Yep. Okay. I think that's a yes. Thank you, Tara. So moving on to Merton's local plan and policies map. Sorry, it's just something in the chamber. I think, yeah, Tara's going to give us an introduction again to this, and then I'll take questions. I think I said I would start in the room this time and then go to virtual questions. Again, I'll try and be a bit flexible if we can. But yeah, I just wanted to thank Tara and officers. This is a huge document. It covers all of the borough. It's a process that's been going on for a number of years. and has had a lot of consultation around it, a lot of input. So just a sort of a big kind of thank you as a starting point. Secondly, and I think Tara will pick this up in her comments, a kind of thank you to councillors for bearing with us. There were some changes I think that came through on the wording around Collier's Wood, which I think now is how it's at the right place. Well, I'll leave it to Tara to talk about, but it's where it was left at our last meeting and where it was left at the cabinet as well. So over to you, Tara.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to extend the thanks you so kindly gave us really out to all the residents and members of the community and businesses and everybody who have participated in the local plan and responded to the consultations over the past 3 years. We couldn't have done this without them. It really does take a plan forward so much when people engage with it, whether on big issues or small issues. And we'd really like to thank all those people who took the time to email or write or speak to us or invite us to their meetings or push us in their newsletters over the past 3 or 4 years. It's absolutely invaluable in creating a plan. And there, as always, there has been a really strong response rate from residents and others in Merton, and we're really very grateful for that. One point I'd like to start with is an apology. A wholehearted apology, because the plan you've received has a big mistake in it that thankfully we've been able to fix thanks to councillors spotting it. In the policy for Collier's Wood Town Centre, as Councillor Butler mentioned before at the last meeting of the Borough Plan panel in March, it was very clear then from the consultation results that we received that the approach that we'd taken to Collier's Wood, not Collier's Woods Tower, Britannia Point, not being the pinnacle in height, was incorrect. And it was resolved at the last Borough Plan Advisory Committee and also by the Cabinet member that the strength of consultation means that we should have reverted to stage 2 of the plan, which says very, very clearly that the existing tower at Collier's Wood, Britannia Point, should remain the pinnacle in terms of height. Now, although this was one of the very first changes we made to wording, just simply due to a compilation error on our part, the erroneous wording was carried forward into the papers in front of you tonight. Thanks to councillors spotting this, we've changed the papers for full council to be absolutely clear that Britannia Point will remain the pinnacle in terms of height in Collier's Wood. This is in the council papers that have gone out to full council today, I think, for the 7th of July meeting. The wording establishing or repeating that Britannia Point remains the pinnacle is also in site allocation CW2, which is the land south, the car park south of Britannia Point, and it's also referred to there. So again, I'd like to apologise for this error, to thank councillors for spotting it, and to reassure everybody that for the big decision-making meeting next week, that error has been corrected. Merton's local plan started in late 2017, and we've had 3 rounds of public consultation at this stage, totaling more than 9 months of engagement. It's continued through the coronavirus pandemic, although we had to move to online consultation as opposed to face-to-face engagement. However, several community groups and residents groups managed to move their engagement online, and we were lucky enough to be able to attend some meetings, even though it was online engagement. This stage of the local plan is the council's final, semi-final stage, should I say. This plan, or the plan that's gone to full council, will be the one that's submitted to the Secretary of State for examination. So the next step in this plan, after on its journey through the meetings, is assuming that full council resolve to approve it next week. It will go to the Secretary of State, and he or she will appoint an independent examiner who will hold an inquiry into the local plan. That inquiry usually takes 6 months, and if at the end it passes the inquiry, then the council can adopt it as their local plan. There's 2 points I want to clarify. One is that the inquiry contains an element of public hearings, so anything between 2 and usually about 6 or 7 days, where people can come and tell the government's inspector what they think of any part of the local plan and have their views listened to and taken on board and maybe change things. And also that before we submit it to the Secretary of State, the Council will publish this plan for 6 weeks. This gives everybody a final opportunity to have their say on the plan and to have their say considered by the inspector. So that's quite an important stage. The plan as a whole contains detailed planning policies and strategic planning policies. It contains about 50 sites for allocation, and it contains land designations such as town centre boundaries and open space. And once adopted, at the end of the examination, it will replace all the council's local plans apart from those on the estate regeneration and on waste management. And it will be used by decision makers, both planning applications committee and officers, in making decisions on applications. It's a very big document. I always apologize for the size of it. It just by its very nature, because it has to deal with so many different issues, it does tend to be very big. So, Chair, at this point, I'd like to pass back and ask councillors if they have any questions on any part of it.
Thank you, Tara. As I said, I'll start in the room and I'll go from left to right. So, Councillor Dollimore.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the officers. You know, clearly a lot of effort has gone into compiling this, and also the residents, of course, for submitting their views at every stage of the process. I've got a couple of points. I will go through them, and Chair, if you think that, you know, officers should take them in chunks, then do feel free to stop me. Starting with page 187, the strategic objectives of the plan. It's, I think, a comment really about how we frame the local plan. I think it's great that we are, you know, really highlighting the need to tackle climate change. We are really calling that out up front. I think strategic objective 2, which is entitled, for those who are not looking at the paper, supporting resilience. And then we go on in the sub-bullets to talk about the need to provide new homes, the need to provide more affordable homes, the fact that we are in this plan as a whole aiming to provide 12,000 homes by 2035. I just think we could do a better job of packaging the strategic vision that we have here and making it a bit more inspiring. I think when we call it supporting resilience, you know, we are clear in this plan, and it's embedded throughout, that we believe there need to be more homes in Merton. We want to build more homes, and the current system isn't working. You know, the housing, there is a housing crisis. We don't want resilience in the current housing situation. So I think we need to make that a bit more inspiring and make it clear that we are looking to not just continue with people not having access to affordable homes. Secondly, you know, on the sections where it goes into a bit more detail on the neighbourhoods and the overall visions for each neighbourhood, I think many of the points raised are very accurate, and obviously there's some unique points that we need to call out about specific neighbourhoods. But I think there's some discrepancies between neighbourhoods. For example, we rightly call out under the section on Collier's Wood that we need to, you know, make sure we are doing all we can to close the social and the health inequalities that exist in that neighbourhood. We don't call that out in the neighbourhood section for Mitcham and for Morden. We know, particularly in Mitcham, that is where some of our health inequalities are at their most acute. So I think going through and making sure we call that point out is important in those summaries for the neighbourhoods.
Okay, Councillor Dollimore, I think it is probably worth at this point if we can flash back to Tara and get her thoughts on what you said, and then I'm happy to come back to you
Sure.
quickly for some other points. Is that all right with you, Tara?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, what I would recommend that I do, Chair and Councillor Dollimore, that I send the notes that I am taking round just to make sure I've captured the points that you're raising here. If the Borough Planning Panel so resolve, these points can be resolved by, or it can be recommended to full council as amendments to the plan that they have in front of them.
Thank you,
Okay.
Tara. So just as a process point, we would resolve that at the end of the meeting, and then you would send the wording round. Is that correct?
Yes, it would need to be resolved at the meeting here tonight. On the basis of what Councillor Doneymore is saying, I could clarify wording points, both from the YouTube recording, of course, but also with all councillors here tonight before full council next week, to make sure the wording that goes on to full council from this meeting is accurate. But yes, it would need to be resolved here tonight as part of this meeting.
Thank you, Tara. Well, I'll pass it back to you, Councillor Doneymore. And yeah, if you can clarify, I appreciate it if you go through your points, but we'll have to come back to it to decide what resolutions that we'll put to the wider committee.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chair. And then just continuing on the neighbourhood section, under Morden, which is covered particularly on page 182 and page 309, I think it's brilliant that in the sections on Wimbledon, we call out the tennis. I think it's really important that we call out Hague Homes in the Morden section and the importance of our veteran community, and that being a really big part of our community in the Merton area. I also think it would be great to call out Morden Park. We have mentioned Morden Hall Park. We haven't specifically, mentioned the great green spaces we have in Morden, such as Morden Park. And then moving on to page 589, which is the section on social infrastructure. In the introduction, so we're talking about policy IN 6.2, page 589. In the summary that we've provided here, we've rightly called out, supporting primary and secondary and also special needs education. I think here we should call out as well early years and childcare, and also provision for young people and youth services, and as an important thing that we should prioritise in our local plan. We do go into some detail on that much later on, but in the summary, that's such an integral part of our community. I think we need to call it out. Lastly, and Tara, I know I've mentioned this and I will pick up the detail with you separately, but I think there are a few typos in the document. I think when we go to the formatting stage, just having a new pair of eyes, just going through and proofing would be very helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Doneymore. Yeah, I think Tara would hold her hands up on the typos. I raised a few with her as well, and I do know. I mean, Tara can come back on this, but I do know this is something that will get resolved at the next. Certainly get resolved at the next stage. Tara, just to come back to you quickly, in terms of the things that have been put by Councillor Doneymore. From my perspective as chair, I don't think there are major changes to the document itself. So if I was to sort of take them to the committee to resolve as a whole, and then you go away and work up the detail, does that sound right to you, or is there anything in there that you think would be a major change? I think some of it was about replicating some of the wording from part of the document into another one, and bringing some things up into the summary. So it's not it doesn't seem like it's changing the kind of essence of the document. It is it's just sort of highlighting some key elements. Does that sound about right to you?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it does. I just have one question of clarification for Councillor Doneymore. Councillor, you cited page 589, the social infrastructure policy, and the importance of early years and childcare and youth services alongside schools, which as officers we'd agree with. Can I just ask, did you mean that in the summary in the local plan that there should be a more holistic approach taken there, or did you mean in the summary in the committee report that we should also refer to that?
Sorry, so do you mean I think we should rewrite page 589 to make sure we've covered early years and childcare provision, and also youth services and providing for young people and young adults in Merton. Is that what you were asking?
If that's, I was asking for clarity as to what exactly what you were referring to under page 589. I'm
Sure.
just trying to find the point.
Yeah, page 589, and then there's two paragraphs on education, I and J. I think it's also on page 588 where we talk about health just before that. You know, we do it later in the document, but calling out, you know, strategically closing the health inequalities between the east and west of the borough is worth calling out there specifically as well.
Yes, I will. I'm just trying to find the reference in the policy to early years and childcare. It's actually in the justification. So the council's policy on early years and childcare is set out on page 588 and 589. It's true that the education section specifically refers to schools, and we can look to see whether or not we'll be able to enhance early years childcare and youth services. In general, those categories are grouped with social and community infrastructure, which covers a very wide range of things, really. And we can look to see whether the text in the justification on page 590, which refers to early years and childcare, and actually lists out the huge range of things that come into social and community infrastructure: place-based emergency services, criminal justice, community safety, facilities for the elderly and the disabled. They all come into this policy. We have highlighted schools and health. It tends to be at the planning application stage that those are the things that people raise with us. And we can look to see if we need to highlight early years and childcare and youth services in the same way.
Sorry, can I just clarify on that? I think if we intend page 588 and 589 as the policy statement on social and community infrastructure, and we then go into the detail later on those elements you've called out, like early years education, youth services, provision for the elderly and disabled, we should absolutely call it out on 588 and 589. That should be a summary and a policy approach to the whole section. And we have gone, you know, the document in some ways goes into a lot of detail, such as point H, where we say support the principle of a new health hub in Mitcham. If we are going to call something so detailed as that out, I think it makes sense to give the overarching principles as well about how we approach social and community infrastructure.
Sorry, Councillor, but do you want to come in on that point specifically?
Yeah, maybe just to help the process along, because I also have because these are points that I completely agree with Councillor Dollymore on. And but I think in terms of, I just want to be absolutely clear about the process here because I don't think we are moving into any change of the principles of the content here. So I think a main point I just wanted to back Councillor Dollymore up on here is that these are ways of, as Councillor Dollymore was saying, going from the detail you have already, but succinctly summarizing them. The first point that was raised earlier, summarizing the vision, I think that needs to be strengthened, but also parts like this where we are already summarizing in some ways things in detail elsewhere, but is inconsistent in its inclusion of those points. So firstly, I just want to back everything up that Councillor Dollymore said, but also to check on the process there that, in your opinion, Tara, please do flag to us where you think we would need to change this approach from what we're doing now, which is going through certain things and having suggestions of amendments, which you would then go away with to see how they could be included and how they could be worded from your basis. But then where we step into areas where it might need a clear resolution from this committee here, this panel here, the process of that would be before full council. So we could agree something verbally now, then get the wording right between us. Is it before full council on Wednesday? Is that correct? Thank you, Joe.
I think I could come in, but I'll let Tara come in on that. That's right.
Thank you, councillors. Yes, broadly, that is the process. The stage that the plan is at, from my understanding of our discussions here tonight, I would agree with that we are not recommending at this point anything significant changes in what's been said tonight so far. I would agree that the process would be to resolve the discussion here at the meeting, because that's under the council's constitution. And if there's particular aspects of the wording that maybe I've typed down too quickly, I will circulate this to councillors. And if I've made a mistake, someone can clarify. And we also have the YouTube recording as the basis for the record of the meeting. And I think if we can get it to full council probably before Wednesday to give people a chance to digest it, that would be helpful.
Thank you for that, Tara. Well, given that and given the broad support from 2 councillors, I'll take that to a resolution now. So if anyone has any objections to that, as Tara's described, please come in now.
Sorry, Chair, could you say that again? I didn't hear it.
I will say that again in a second. Councillor Butler's just coming in.
I was maybe worth waiting until everyone's had their time to discuss it, and then see if there are, if it's on the same lines as Councillor Dollymore of
yeah, so
being that not changing the content of it.
Yeah, so I think my point really is just to resolve this bit of the discussion. So I'm happy for people to come in on other aspects of the plan, but I think it's worth getting people's views on this particular bit, because if nobody objects to those changes, we can bank those with Tara and move on to wider discussion if everyone's happy. Yep, that's happy in the room. Looks like happy in virtually as well. Did you pick that up, Dennis?
Yes, no, that's fine.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, in which case, thank you for that, Councillor Dollymore. And Tara, I'll open it out to further questions. Councillor Holden.
Thank you, and thank you for putting this report together. It's rather long, and I must admit I've not had full time to read it yet, after only being told last night I was due to be on the committee tonight. But one thing that I did spot was a couple of the Wimbledon sites. So whatever happened to site WI 14, and I'm sure there's a few other sites that don't seem to exist. So maybe when could Tara comment on that in terms of the numbering of the sites. And also I've noticed sites have already been included that are already done and dusted, such as site WI 12, the Wimbledon Stadium site. I don't expect any further development on that site because it's almost finished. So is it worth actually including in the report?
Over to you, Tara.
Thank you, Councillor. It's a good question, and those 2 sites come up quite a lot in questions. Some sites during the 3-year process have fallen out of the local plan, usually because development has progressed to a stage that they don't need to be included. And site WI 14 was one of those. That was, I recall, the site at the junction of Hartfield Road, which is being redeveloped, which has received planning permission and is currently on site. And for that reason, it's substantially developed. It doesn't need an allocation. And on site WI 12, I think, Councillor, you're probably at the stage that it's correct. It's borderline whether we should include WI 12. But at the start of this local plan process in 2017 and into 2018 and 2019, progress was a bit slower on the development of that site. The residential started coming out of the ground in about 2018, late 2018, and the stadium at that point hadn't started. And so we put it in the first draft of the local plan because it's such a big, significant site that we didn't want to get to a stage where the council's plan had been finished, but one of the most significant sites in the borough hadn't yet been built, and then the planning policy fell away from the previous local plan, and there was nothing to secure the homes and the stadium and the squash and leisure facilities that have since been built there. So in summary, I would say on the stadium sites, there's barely a need to include it anymore because as it happens, construction has continued, the stadium has been built, it is now open. The last bit of the construction is around the health and fitness club, so most of that site is resolved. It's in the plan. Whether the inspector looks at this and says, actually, by the time this plan's adopted, that site will be redeveloped and can be removed, that's definitely a possibility.
Thank you, Tara. Did you want to come back on that quickly?
Slightly different question. Before this is adopted, this plan, how much weight can be given to it in planning terms, in applications or in discussions with developers? And compared to that, what about the old sites and policies plan from 2014? Is that now so old that it can be almost disregarded by applicants? So what I'm trying to get at is which one is still relevant and which one, or does it default to national policy at this stage? Which one takes priority?
Tara.
The council's adopted plan will be in place all the way until the day that full council resolves to adopt this new one after the examination. This plan gathers weight in decision making as it goes through the process. Every time full council votes on it, it gathers a little more weight due to the significance of the full council vote. However, the adopted plan, the sites and policies plan, the London Plan 2021, and the core planning strategy will remain in place all the way through. It's also true that policies that are controversial receive kind of less weight in the draft emerging plan until they get adopted. So an example might be a particular development site will have a limited amount of weight as it goes through the process if people are still objecting to it being allocated in the plan. Whereas policies that, for example, protect metropolitan open land, which are also a national policy and regional policy, they will have extra weight as it goes through. So in summary, the sites and policies plan and the London plan and the core strategy will still apply for the next 6 months while this plan goes through the process.
Thank you, Tara. I'm going to move to those with us virtually, but I will come back for a final round of questions. Is there any, Councillor Pearce or Councillor McGrath?
Yes, I have a couple of questions, Carl.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much. My questions, I've got a number of questions. The first one is about page 341, which is about dwelling conversions. And I just wanted to understand what this is saying. Is it saying that if you are converting a 3-bedroom home or bigger, it has to, when it's converted, you have to end up with another family home defined as 3 bedrooms or more? Does this say anything about a problem that we have in parts of my ward? And I know from comments I've heard from other councillors in other parts of the borough of 2-bedroom properties being converted into 1-bedroom flats. Does it affect that? Because I think it definitely needs to. So that's my first question. The second question is that the very large number of homes that we're planning to build over the next many years depends on population growth. When is the population growth as at? Has it been taken into account the fact that the population of London at the moment certainly appears to be going down? We don't know the effect of Brexit yet on the population of London, and how much is that taken into account? And my third question, and I apologise because I may have missed this, but on affordable homes in section 11.132, it talks about maximising affordable home provision, which we all, I'm sure, agree with, including from small sites. Now, at the moment, sites less than 10 don't have to have affordable homes. Are we saying that in this plan we're doing something to change that? Thank you.
Over to you, Tara.
you, Councillor. Councillor, can I ask about the second query you raised? I have the record on dwelling conversions and affordable homes, but just to clarify the second point.
On the
raised.
planning, on the population growth.
Population growth, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. On the issue of dwelling conversions, there is the policy in the plan on dwelling conversions, policy D510, which looks at the issue you raised, where we used to see 3-bedroom houses divided into lots of very small homes. And what that was doing is, in some parts of the borough, it was having a detrimental effect on the amount of family homes available. So actually in Merton's core planning strategy 10 years ago, we put a policy in place to say, if you're going to try and convert a family home, you must re-provide a family home of 3 beds. I know that the Apostles Residents Association in particular have raised the issue in their area, which isn't just unique to their area. There are some 2-bed houses elsewhere in the borough, and they felt that they were losing 2-bed homes, which were being converted to 1-bed homes. This is also, in some cases, they explained that the 2-bed property had been converted internally to be a 2-bed property in the first place. Now, the Apostles Residents Association did some very thorough research and looked into this in detail for us, for which we thank them. It didn't altogether support the approach that this is an issue. What it did show is that in the sort of 2010, 2013 stage, there were a rash of conversions at that time of 2-bed homes and indeed 3-bed homes, but this has substantially slowed down. And the nature of those beautiful buildings in the Apostles area has meant that this issue hasn't actually been continuing in the past 5 years at the same pace that it was before. The other point to raise is that in converting a family home with 3 bedrooms, the reprovision of a family home is also acceptable, but we don't actually have an issue with the loss of 2-bed homes in Merton, as in we do have quite a lot of 2-bed homes in the borough, and therefore their loss isn't as substantial. So I know it's disappointing for the Apostles Residents Association in this case, but I think our policy remains in place that a family home, a large 3-bed home, is the ones that we were seeking to reduce the conversion of without reprovision.
Okay, so basically that has stayed the same as it was in the previous plan.
It has, yes.
Fine. Okay, thank you.
On the issue of population growth, yes, this is a very hot topic. The Merton share of London's homes, which is set for us at a pan-London level, is based on population growth. It's based on the capacity of each borough to accommodate homes. It's based on migration patterns and all these sorts of things. It is fair to say that there is a lot of emerging evidence that certainly population trends have changed as a result of the issues you mentioned. While we'll be using the current assumptions in this plan, we've had a census very recently, earlier this year, and that will really help to inform sort of a May 2021 situation for London and for the whole of the UK. What London will do is they'll look at that population trend and they will look at how that affects housing needs. The Mayor of London is required to do a very early review of his plan on specifically on housing matters. So that's likely to come forward within the next 5 years. And when that does, we'll be taking the data and information and policy on housing and we'll be using it ourselves, as will every other borough in London. So if there has been a population reduction or increase as a result of the issues you mentioned, probably about 3 years' time, we'll be able to say how that's affected house building. And I should also say that national government has a similar policy on that. On the issue of affordable homes on sites of less than 10 homes, yes, you're right, Councillor. We are proposing in this plan that small sites, start to contribute again to affordable homes. This won't be on site. social housing providers have made it abundantly clear to us that they do not want to, it's very expensive for them to manage lots and lots of little sites all over the place. They would much rather have a larger site to be able to manage, as they can manage it more effectively. So they have made it clear that if we were to introduce a policy that proposed affordable homes on tiny sites, that they simply wouldn't be able to take them on as affordable homes. However, we are proposing in this plan, as you've mentioned, to take cash in lieu from small sites and to use that towards affordable housing. And that has to be, it can't be used for anything else. It has to be used for additional affordable homes. I think this might be one of the issues that may be challenging with the planning inspector, but we are absolutely convinced that as Merton is a borough of small sites, that this policy is right for Merton. And we hope to be able to persuade the inspector the same.
Great, thank you for your answers.
Thank you for that, Tara. Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got one thing to follow up on what Councillor McGrath has just said, and two questions. The thing about population, now at the school standards panel, which I chaired, and the children and young people's panel, we were told that the take up of nursery and reception places for 15 and 30 hours a week is falling, is going down. There will be gaps in classrooms all over the borough, and it is assumed that this is a dual problem, because young families are moving out and the birth rate is dropping. Are we going to consider that? And the two questions are, there was a phrase I read, place plans and the 20-minute neighbourhood. Now I assume 20 minutes means walking, and I was unclear as to what, if we are having smaller facilities rather than one big hub, like, I don't know, a giant hospital, and we're having, say, 2 or 3 smaller ones nearer to where people live. But I wonder if you could explain what that actually would entail, and how long you anticipate before that will become a reality. And the third thing is, I mean, I suggested 2 years ago that, also taken up another point for another councillor, about sort of the climate change and so on. Now there is page, I must admit I didn't read all of this because I just couldn't, but on page 467 you talk about smart metering, water saving and recycling measures, and minimizing the use of tap water. Well, that's all fine, but if we don't do something about the bigger issues, as I see it, I mean, we can't even take our schools forward into prevention of climate change, because I suggested 2 years ago, instead of when boilers break down, most of them are gas boilers, you go in there and you send in a repairman that costs hundreds and hundreds of pounds. We should pull out the gas boilers, put in, at much more expense, I must add, of course, put in electric boilers and solar panels on the roof. It would be a big expense to start with, but if we're really serious about climate change, those are the sorts of things that we have to do. And I've been told it's unaffordable. So some of this stuff, you know, is it going to happen because of the costs?
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Over to you, Tara.
Thank you, Councillor. On the issues of childcare, early years places and school places, this plan is backed by a very thorough, in-depth infrastructure needs assessment, which looks at all the matters of infrastructure, from healthcare to transport to police service, including early years, childcare, and our educational places. And we're in touch with our colleagues in Children's Schools and Families on this matter. And they have mentioned that in contrast to the previous 15 years, there are lower numbers in nurseries now than there have been previously. Later on this year, in September, our colleagues in Children's Schools and Families will be reporting again on the school roles and nursery roles to one of the councillor panels. I'm afraid I forget which one. And we will keep using that data. And we've used it in the infrastructure needs assessment. So in summary, councillor, we're not proposing a loss of nurseries or childcare or early years on the basis of the current lower numbers at this stage. That would be a decision for the council once the council had decided whether or not the lower numbers now was just a blip or whether it was going to turn into a full trend of lower numbers as it was about 20 years ago. On the issues of place plans and 20-minute neighbourhoods, 20-minute neighbourhood is sometimes referred to the 15-minute city, and it isn't a precise measurement. It isn't saying it definitely has to be walking. It's really just to make sure there's easy access within 20 minutes of travel to certain things. Now, for a visit to a very big hospital, which hopefully most of us won't have to do very often, it might be 20 minutes drive. But for something that one would have to do every day, like buy a loaf of bread, ideally it's walking or cycling as close as possible to your door. We're very lucky in Merton by the virtue of our location in that many places in the borough are 20 minutes apart, walking, cycling, taking public transport, taking the tube, train, or driving. The borough is 3 miles across at its narrowest point, so quite compact. And really the purpose of the 20-minute neighbourhood is to try and make sure that some of the southern areas of the borough in particular, so everything from Lower Merton all the way through Cannon Hill, St Helier, Ravensbury towards Pollard's Hill, some of the more highly residential areas that maybe have fewer amenities, that we manage to try and retain these amenities, these shops and services, so that the many, many people living there, a little bit further away from the town centres than perhaps Wimbledon, Colliers Wood and North Mitcham, that they still have shops and services that they use regularly within 20 minutes of their home. On the issue of climate change, the policies that we have in the plan, this proposed plan, are much, much stronger than our existing policies. And our existing policies are fairly strong. They go very, very far in a lot of detail about the carbon saving that we're expecting from new development. And while I can't talk about what schools in Merton might be doing with the schools budget, I will draw councillors' attention to the policy CC24 on low carbon energy, which makes clear, for example, that we are asking new development to use low carbon heat. And if someone is building a new home or something new, we're asking them not to use gas boilers from 2 years before government has put that requirement in. So from January 2023, we're not looking for new development in Merton to use gas boilers in order to tackle the climate emergency. And there are a number of other very detailed things within those policies to make sure that the buildings are well insulated so that they don't get too hot or too cold, that we manage to generate our heat and our energy from low carbon sources, and that they're designed and orientated so that they will reduce their energy consumption.
Tara, Councillor Pearce, does that answer your questions?
Can I just say one thing more?
Go ahead, quickly.
I'm what I've read in here, I'm all in favour of. I'm just concerned that we're putting in, I mean, it's great to have ambition and great to have sort of long into the future and say we want to do this, but surely if we can't look after or change our own buildings, how can we put pressure on private enterprise, if you like, private developers and private everything to actually do what we're asking them to do. I mean, that's not a question. That's just my, I don't know. That's just me thinking it out. But I do, everything I've read in here, I'm very in favour of. I just wonder whether it's affordable in the timescale that we're going to have to do it in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Given you said it's not a formal question, what I'll ask is if Tara can just sort of weave it in, because I know Councillor Butler was keen to come in, so if we go to Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. I echo many of the points Councillor Pearce has just made, actually. This is a large document, and please, Tara, forgive me if I've missed it completely. I'm interested in, especially on that line of climate change and how we influence developments to take these things into account. Something that a lot of my residents in Abbey Ward and when I'm going around Wimbledon, the take-up of electric vehicles is fast increasing, and a lot of residents in existing homes want easier ways of charging their vehicles and options around that. But I'm also interested in where in this document is, I might have missed it, to future developments to making sure that they have provision for electric charging of vehicles, or provisions to maybe contribute to the borough in lieu of that. Thank you, Chair.
Tara.
Thank you, Councillor. Policy T16.4, and it's on page 570 of the agenda, which tells you everything about how long this document is, really. It contains the policy on parking and low emission vehicles. One thing maybe subject to resolution of this committee we might want to make slightly clearer is that while it directs developers towards the London Plan standards for electricity charging and low emission vehicles, these standards are now very high. At the moment, new developments have to provide 50% of their parking spaces as electric vehicle charging points and 50% as being capable of electric vehicle charging points. So we follow the London Plan standard to try and be consistent across London to drive up the number of charging points for new development for electric vehicles. And we deal separately with requests that you referred to, Councillor, from existing residents in existing homes that are looking for electric charging points outside on the street. That's not part of this particular plan because that wouldn't require planning permission.
Go come back on that.
Yeah, just to ask if there are some planning applications that don't have any need for parking. We're seeing a lot of sometimes controversially the adding of 1 or 2 floors to existing buildings that sometimes don't need any provision for parking. Is there anything we can be strengthening here to say you're not contributing there, but in lieu, try and is it section 106? Is that where we'd focus that, or can we actually be saying something explicit about positively influencing the council's electric charging infrastructure? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think what you might be referring to, Councillor, is the new permitted development rights that have been introduced by government. There are a wide range of permitted development rights now, and one of them is to allow apartment buildings to have 2 extra floors added on top. And this is without the need for planning permission. Essentially, it's outside the planning system, and therefore we can't apply a Section 106 agreement simply because it doesn't require planning permission in the first place, and therefore there's no legal framework to attach that kind of agreement to. We we can write in council strategies that that's what we're looking for, but unfortunately the local plan wouldn't kick in if planning permission isn't required. So in those particular cases, unfortunately, no matter what we wrote in this document, it wouldn't apply because planning permission isn't required for those types of development. And I support your frustration on that.
Thank you, Tara. Do come back in.
Just a
Last
slight
word.
comment, just for the record, my complete frustration with that situation. And I know many of my colleagues are very frustrated with that change in national government planning policy there. Thank you, Chair.
As chair, I would echo that point as well. Okay, well, I think everyone's had an opportunity to come in. I will give you, if anyone has a final point to make, I'll give one last opportunity. Anyone virtually? Councillor Dolmore.
Thank you, Chair. I just thought we could place on record our thanks to the officers for all their work on this, and residents as well who have submitted their thoughts. I think it's clearly a big piece of work, and it will guide us for the next 15 years or so.
Thank you for that. You've stolen my thunder, but I think Councillor Butler might want to echo.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I'd like to echo that, but also very wary that Tara needs us to get a resolution on there. But I think we were discussing earlier that nothing that we've discussed already takes it out of the bounds of what the consultations.
Don't worry, I'll deal with that at the end as chair.
Yeah,
don't
okay,
worry.
brilliant. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, with that, yes, I would say we've already resolved, I think, the issues that Councillor Dollemore raised. So if everyone is happy to resolve the report, I'm at the moment not seeing any objections. No, none from online either. So I think that's again a big thank you to Tara, a big thank you to all of you, and I echo everything that's been said. A big thank you to local residents, all of the local groups, residents groups, everyone that's inputted to this plan over the years to make it better and to make it what it is now. So yes, a final big thank you, and good night to everybody. Now we've got a slightly awkward bit with people online.